Welcome to our deep dive into the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, which, let's be honest, sounds about as exciting as watching paint dry, but is actually far more terrifying. Because the CPI is this weird economic bellwether that tells us just how screwed we are when it comes to the cost of, well, existing. This critical economic indicator measures the average change over time in the prices paid by urban consumers for a representative basket of goods and services. Think of it as the economic equivalent of your grandma's purse, full of seemingly random things that, when examined closely, paint a picture of her day-to-day life. Except instead of hard candies and tissues, it's rent payments and gasoline. And much like how you know grandma's doing well when she's got those fancy imported chocolates in there, a CPI trending upwards means things are getting more expensive for the rest of us. So, let's break down the major categories that contribute to the overall inflation rate and see just how deep this economic rabbit hole goes. First up, we've got housing, which makes up roughly a third of the CPI. Now, you don't need to be a financial whiz to know that housing costs have been going through the roof lately. We're talking rent increases that would make your eyes water faster than a housing-insecure millennial watching a Pixar movie. And it's not just rent, oh no. We've got owner's equivalent rent, which is a fancy way of saying how much homeowners they could rent their homes for, and let's just say, delusions of grandeur are rampant in this market. Add to that lodging away from home because apparently, even a night in a Motel 6 now requires a small loan, and you can see why the housing component of the CPI is about as stable as a Jenga tower after a few beers. Next up, let's talk about everyone's favorite pastime, eating, or more accurately, stressing about how much it costs to eat. Food and beverages account for about 13.5% of the CPI, and frankly, that number feels low considering how often we're all just one avocado toast away from financial ruin. We're talking groceries, dining out, which, let's be real, is basically a luxury good at this point, and even the price of a stiff drink to forget about how expensive groceries and dining out are. And with supply chain issues, bird flu outbreaks, and weather events that seem ripped from the Book of Revelation, it's no wonder that the cost of simply existing is enough to make you lose your appetite. Buckle up, Buttercup, because we're talking transportation. This category makes up about 14.6% of the CPI, and it's a real gas guzzler, pun intended. We're talking car payments that could double as mortgage payments, gasoline prices that fluctuate more than a teenager's mood, and insurance premiums that seem to go up even when you're not using your car, because apparently, existing is a liability. And don't even get me started on public transportation. Sure, it's supposed to be the more affordable option, but when a monthly subway pass costs more than a week's worth of groceries, it's hard to justify. So, whether you're driving, taking the bus, or strapping on your rollerblades to avoid the cost of transportation altogether, just know that this category is hitting our wallets harder than a pothole on the interstate. Chapter 4. Medical Care, where health costs more than your health. Let's talk about healthcare, shall we? That fun little system where a broken leg can lead to financial ruin faster than you can say pre-existing condition. Medical care accounts for about 8.8% of the CPI, and it's the one category where we're actively discouraged from seeking out the best deals. Want a doctor with good reviews? Be prepared to empty your savings account. Need a specific medication? Hope you've got good insurance or you're basically playing pharmaceutical roulette. And don't even get me started on hospital bills, which are written in a language so convoluted, they make the iTunes terms and conditions look like light reading. Chapter 5. Energy fueling inflation, one price hike at a time. Next up, let's talk about energy, because nothing says fun like skyrocketing electricity bills. Energy makes up about 7.5% of the CPI, and let's just say it's been a real live wire lately. We're talking about the gasoline that powers our cars, the electricity that keeps our lights on, and the natural gas that heats our homes, all of which seem to be engaged in a perpetual game of price limbo, and the only way to win is to not play, which unfortunately isn't really an option. So, whether you're trying to stay warm in the winter, cool in the summer, or simply exist in a world that requires electricity, just know that the energy sector is working harder than a hamster on a wheel to keep those prices high and our wallets empty. Chapter 6. Apparel, fashion victims of inflation. Now let's talk about something a little less dire, shall we? Apparel. Yes, even the clothes on our backs are subject to the whims of the CPI, making up about 2.9%. Gone are the days of fast fashion bargains and guilt-free shopping sprees. These days, even a trip to your local discount retailer can leave you feeling like you just financed a runway show. And with supply chain issues, increased production costs, and the ever-present pressure to keep up with the latest trends, it's no wonder that looking good is becoming increasingly expensive. Okay, we've covered the essentials: housing, food, transportation. Now let's talk about the fun stuff, or at least it used to be fun before inflation got its grubby little hands on it. Recreation, which makes up about 5.7% of the CPI, is supposed to be about enjoying ourselves, indulging in hobbies, and taking a break from the relentless monotony of daily life. But with the cost of everything from concert tickets to sporting events to that VR headset you've been eyeing going through the roof, it's enough to make you want to take up knitting as your primary source of entertainment. And let's not forget about education and communication, which make up a combined 6.8% of the CPI. We're talking about the rising cost of tuition, textbooks, internet service, and phone bills. You know, all the things that are supposed to help us better ourselves and stay connected with the world around us. But with student loan debt reaching crisis levels, and internet providers seemingly hell-bent on squeezing every last penny out of us, it's no wonder that many people are struggling to afford the basic tools necessary for education and communication in the 21st century. And finally, we have the catch-all category of other goods and services, which accounts for roughly 3.3% of the CPI. This is where you'll find things like personal care products, haircuts, dry cleaning, basically, all the little things that add up to a big chunk of change by the end of the month. It's the death by 1,000 cuts of the CPI, where a few dollars here and there for a haircut, a new toothbrush, or that overpriced latte you just to have all contribute to the slow but steady drain on your bank account. So there you have it, a whirlwind tour of the Consumer Price Index and all the ways it's currently making our lives more expensive. Each of these components plays a distinct role in shaping the overall inflation rate, like a terrible orchestra where every instrument is out of tune, and the conductor is a raccoon wearing a party hat. Significant price increases in major categories like housing, food, and energy can substantially drive up the CPI, reflecting higher living costs for consumers. And while we might joke about needing to take out a loan to afford a gallon of milk, the reality is that inflation disproportionately impacts those who are already struggling to make ends meet. Monitoring these elements helps economists and policymakers understand inflation dynamics and implement appropriate monetary policies, but it doesn't make it any less painful when you're staring at your bank statement wondering where it all went wrong. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more insightful content. And remember, if you ever find yourself needing to choose between paying rent or eating, just remember, avocado toast is not a meal.